enjoyed the
I have to
film.
thank you.
And I really enjoyed the Q&A. And what I'd love to do, and I didn't tape it, and I'm really kind of ignored it myself that I didn't.
Well, let's try to figure out what we said that you're interested
what
in.
I really loved, well, I loved any number of things.
I'm very grateful, by the way. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I thought it was interesting when you envision, you have an interest in history. And
me or the character? Me personally.
You personally.
Yeah.
And when you envisioned that whole area as the
fishing grounds, yeah, the Grand Banks, yeah.
The Grand Banks, and how it's changed over the years, and your description of, I think it was in the 1700s.
Yeah, the 16th and 17th century.
17th century. Could you talk
about
that?
Yeah, because I love doing research on movies. It's one of my favorite things. Because I feel like I'm educated. If someone said, who are you, Treat? I'd say I'm jack of all trades, master of none. Because what I get to do is to find out what other people do and then sort of pretend that I can do it really well and get good enough at it that it looks like I know how to do it. That's what actors do. So I love the research on the island. I wanted to know about the history of the island. I felt one thing I would have added to the film, which I would love, is this sort of this mystical quality of the Native Americans who had peopled it, that they're still there, that their spirit is still there. I was 86 then, that they had other more important issues, but I love the idea of these places that we have actually, we were invaders. And this was historically, peopled by these people come across the ice bridge. And then later on, what happened was, when in search for food, the Spanish and the English would come over, and the Grand Banks, you could drop a hook without bait on it and pull up these gigantic codfish. And so during the fishing season, when they would come, the ships would come from Spain and from England and from France, and they would all pile up in that little tiny, what there is an island. Here's the island. And then what there is there's a little tiny island, and then that's west. So this little tiny island blocks just enough of the bay that you get like 200 ships in there squeezed in, like sardines. And then they would all set up their drying racks. You can imagine that, drying racks on the beach, on that sloped area, which was now the main street going up. When I arrive at the boat there, that's where they all would set up the drying racks, and then they would go out and fish the hell out of the place, never overfishing because you couldn't. And they would dry the cod, and once the holds were filled with the cod, back to Europe. And what was interesting is they ate tons of lobster, tons of it. They loved lobsters. Lobsters turned to jelly. They went bad within 2 days. You can't keep a lobster. It's got to be swimming. They didn't have they didn't have tanks, so they would just gorge themselves on lobster and then just say goodbye to the lobsters because they couldn't dry them. It just didn't work that way. It was a different kind of meat. And they'd take the cod back, which was a delicacy, I guess. It was very important for protein in that period. I thought it was fascinating. I'd love to have sort of been a fly on the wall when they were there.
That was so interesting.
Yeah, it is to
when
me.
You looked, when you research that, because I don't think people know that, offhand. And
they didn't realize how often people were coming over here before we really took over. It became a country. They were coming over like crazy to fish, and there were beautiful fishing grounds. And one of the things that the film really only touches on, she gives it to me in a speech in the woods where she says, "Do you know what it takes to get a couple of shrimp on your plate?" I mean, that's true.
Wow.
These trawlers, Japan, we're guilty of it. The big, when they drag, they're killing everything. And there's a big problem right now, of course, with the dying off of the coral, and that has to do partially with global warming, which of course doesn't exist, right? But I think that it's important for us to realize what we have done, the damage we've done. And I love that part of the movie. I love that part of the movie. That there's a deep part of Charlie that cares about this stuff. We don't see it at the beginning, and it's sort of, he becomes, he kind of gets back in touch with the land and wants to go home and be an islander, which I love.
I love
it. Is a fairy tale, but I love another fairy tale.
Well, I don't want it.
You know
to
what?
Be a fairy
tale. I'm living the fairy tale. I live in Vermont on a farm. Everybody, I was on Fox News, and this guy who his show, he kept saying, "You're Hollywood. You're Hollywood." I said, "No, I'm not Hollywood. I live in Vermont. I live on a farm. I'm on a tractor most of the time." yeah, but you're Hollywood. I said, no, I'm not. I finally said, I'm not going to win with this guy, because he was looking for an angle, you know. What do you say? Why is everyone in Hollywood a communist? And I thought, this is a joke.
What?
Yeah.
He didn't watch Trumbo, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know. So I said, listen, I live in the state where my senator is almost a communist, and I like him very much. So, you know, I don't know. It was silly, but yeah. I mean, I think you can find a place in your life that, even with the stress of doing what we do and being in the movies, which is hard work, but there are also people who are professional celebrities, which blows my mind these days. You know, they videotape themselves and become famous. It's kind of strange. Yeah. But it's not what I'm not envious of them, because I don't aspire that. I'd rather be a good actor who wasn't that well known. But it's possible to sort of. I'm on my 64th year, 65th year, and I really have never been so content living in a little house in the country. So
you're in the land, and you're a farmer.
Yeah. Well, I farm my giant
fun.
garden.
For fun.
Yeah. I think being a real farmer would be really hard.
That's tricky. But people are going back. Not to get off the topic, but people are going back to the land.
And kids coming.
Southwest.
Yep.
Kids are going. They're leaving Wall Street.
The farm to table kids coming up that hate Wall Street coming up, and they're so smart. They're taking their business acumen. They're saying, well, we know how to sell something. What are we going to make that we know how to sell? And they're making cheeses, beers, breads. It's extraordinary the things that people have come up with to do, and we reap the benefits. There's a farmers market every other day somewhere else in town.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah, the artisan cheeses now, and I love cheese. God, I love them. Great, and the beers are beginning extraordinary too.
All artisanal.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, fun.
So, Treat, I heard you yesterday. It seems like, from what you're talking, the island really moved you in many ways. And also shooting there, you were talking a little bit about the complications and fun of shooting there, things you did not have. So as a storyteller, and you bring a lot of those emotions in the character as well, what you feel. But as a storyteller, what is it that really moved you about this story? Because
Robert is the storyteller. I'm the conduit for the storyteller. But I think I was very moved by the Capra-esque quality of a guy who really has done his best and worked very hard for people. I'm trying to put this in where it's not in a political light. He's worked very hard all his life to do what he does, and he's sacrificed a lot of his time to sit in a trailer and listen to their complaints, some of which are mundane, selfish, narcissistic, uninteresting, and yet he does it because that's part of the job. A lot of those guys never go home. And I was very moved by the fact that at this part of his life, a guy that he loved very much, almost like a son, throws him under the bus. The character of Jared, Ryan Merriman, and he wants to give up, and he says, "The hell with it." He's lost faith in people. He's lost faith in himself. He's lost faith in life, and I think he has a deep-seated sense of decency and honor. And I think that scene, which I just love, how good Ryan is in that scene, where he says, "Listen, I did a terrible thing, and I'll never be able to apologize enough, but don't let me be the reason you gave up on this. You've done good work, and you should stand up for yourself." And then Charlie goes and gives that exquisite speech that Robert wrote. So to me, I'm always moved even thinking about the speech. I think it speaks to a whole breed of people right now following a certain presidential candidate who are all about American flags and bumper stickers and loud music, and there are people whose patriotism and love of country is deep and profound and very quiet. My dad's was. He served in World War II. He never talked about who he was voting for. He's no rah-rah guy, but he did what everybody else had to do. And I think Charlie's that kind of guy. He fought in a war. He served his country, and I think he's deeply hurt by this attack on somebody who had been and fought in Vietnam. And I think he also, it's not mentioned in the movie, I kind of like that Hemingway once said, the best thing about a short story is what you leave out, what's unsaid. Mm-hmm. And I think that he has been suffering from a type of PTSD ever since he left Vietnam.
Right.
That's why he's become a workaholic. It keeps it keeps the monsters at bay, so to speak. And so I think that turning point is really beautiful for him. That once he does that, it's like he's put to rest all the demons. Somehow he's tamed the demons, and he can go to the island and say, I love it. He says, I'm hanging up my armor. It's a great line. And goes, and hopefully Charlie has another good 20 years of peace, which he deserves. To me, that was the deepest part of it for me.
But as an actor, is there? It seems very personal too. Was there something? What was your process? Was there something?
Well, I've just gone through the same thing myself. I was making bad action films in Asia. Not that I don't love Asia, I do. That was the best part of going, was being able to see other countries. But I was doing these really B movies and wondering to myself, what am I doing? And I kind of had an epiphany, and I came back, and oddly enough, we lost everything in the crash. I was building a very big house in Park City, Utah, and all my money had been poured into it, and I couldn't keep up the payments, and I lost the house. This big television star lost his house. And we drove back to Vermont with a trailer behind the car, like Beverly Hillbillies, except we hadn't discovered oil. And we went back, and I started over. And we started to recover. But in the course of that, by being forced back to my beautiful home in Vermont, and by going back into where I was being invited to do more theatrical things, because there wasn't that out there for me, I began to sort of return to my roots of theater and my love of my farm, my little house, my family, and in a way, this event in our lives was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's a funny thing how the most difficult things, when you're at your worst, you find that they somehow, the old saying, when one door closes, another one's going to open. You sure don't know that when the door closes on you, though. So that's where I was, and I've had this wonderful. I don't know I'm just very happy acting. So I haven't starred in a movie in 25 years. I've played nice parts. I've played interesting roles. I've played psychopaths. I've played Mike Ovitz. I just played Ted Kennedy. But I haven't had a film that my character was the central character. Not that it bothered me, but I was very happy guesting on Chicago Fire and White Collar and doing Law & Order SVU and guesting on, I was a Hawaii Five-0 and CSI with Ted Danson, who I went to school with. It was all fun. It was all great, and I'll go back to doing that again if I have to, But I just started working again regularly, just like a working actor, and that was really a great joy to me. That what I really like to do is act, and I don't. Somebody said to me, "Aren't you out of? What do you say? Are you out of the mix by being in Vermont?" And I said, "I don't know how to be in the mix. I don't know what you do." He said, "Well, you get out there. You go to parties and stuff." I said, "I don't know how to do that." I thought if you did good work, if you build it, they will come. I thought that was what it was about. But basically, in long-winded way, I think my life is very comparable to Charlie's in a sort. Nobody threw me under the bus. The bankers threw me under the bus. The corruption and the over mortgaging of things, and I got caught up in it too. I probably should never have taken a mortgage that big in a house. Well, I learned my lesson. But I think these are the things that which does not kill me makes me stronger, and it has, and we're in a very good place up there.
So I would say, how did you balance the comedic parts of the film with more of the dramatic parts? One of my favorite scenes was the parade of the constituents,
I love
where
it.
literally there's one scene with an explicit object that had me laughing out loud so much.
It's called a dildo.
But then in the next scene, you got a lot more serious when we were talking about the Iraq War. So I was wondering, how did you approach those scenes?
Well, I think, you always get this question, is it a comedy or is it a drama? And I say, it's a good movie. I think a good movie. If you look at Capra's films, and Capra was we hope we came somewhere near Capra's kind of what he elicited from people in his movies. But I think any movie that is there's great comedy and a lot of pathos and a lot of deep feeling in good movies. I will always try to find the comedy. I'm going to be looking under every nook and cranny to find something that's funny, and I'm always joyful. That was an ad lib when I was looking at that scene, And he says another 2 satisfied customers, and I say 3. That thing had a life of its own. And that was an ad lib I came up with, and I thought about it for weeks. I said, what could we get? So little things like that are a joy to and it's also, I think, if you've been in a fight with your loved one or somebody, you always find in the middle of the fight somebody says something and you start to laugh. It's just so ridiculous, it's funny. So I try never to say, well, a serious scene has to be serious and a funny scene has to be funny. I think things happen organically, and the humor should come out of behavior and come out of the story. But there is, I don't see it as transitioning. I see it as the people are able to make 180-degree turns emotionally. We're just like that, we're built that way. So you can laugh in the middle of a fight, and you can get angry when you're having a nice dinner and somebody says the one thing that really pisses you off, and all of a sudden this joyful evening where somebody says, "Is it funny when you did that?" And you're like, "I didn't do that." And all of a sudden, boom, the whole scene changes. So to me, it's just human nature that these things can coexist in the same scene.
One thing you guys were mentioning, a lot of folks said that you were not just an actor in this film. You're also a creator. There's so much
executive producer.
Well,
and plus also you wrote, came up with parts. So how was that process?
Well, there was no executive producer in my case until what happened was, listen, if I'm with Sidney Lumet, I don't have to do much. But when I'm with a guy like Robert and Jared, who are the first-time directors, I had to do a lot. And I only stepped up when it was necessary. And there was no ego involved in any of it. When it wasn't necessary, all I want to do is come in and find out where where do I sit and where do I stand and what's comfortable, and then make the best scene I can make. And what happened was that after the movie was done, it was very simple. We then went back to the island to shoot 4 more days because Joanna, who made this movie beautiful, Joanna Giebelhaus, who's our editor, said, I'm missing footage. I can't make the film. So when we went back to the island, I flew myself over in my plane, and I was the star of the film. I was the gaffer. I was the grip. I did some food service, and I carried stuff around. And we all, 4 of us, there were only 4 of us, Robert, myself, Joanna, and Jared came too, and Joe, the DP, and we were a little tiny film crew, and we got all those shots. They got me coming up the stairs. We got a part of the speech we'd missed where I come out on the stage and look out because that transition didn't exist. We got me looking at the stars at night where Charlie kind of goes, "What the hell am I doing? This is pretty cool." And my agent said, "You get paid for that?" I said, No, we just all did it. And he said, "You're going to be a producer on this. This is ridiculous. You have put so much. I've never had an actor put so much of himself into a movie and give so much of himself, and you deserve it." So, and they immediately said, "Oh, of course, sure." Nobody ever thought of it. It was just like, "Okay, if he wants to be a producer." So it was a title given to me, almost like a trophy for hard work, I think. But I'm proud of it because we did work very hard, and I have been. Once I did get the title, I got very involved in the post-production process, and I've been very involved in this. And I'm more involved in the sense of how does this work. I'm not saying we should do this. I'm the guy going, okay, so how does it go out to the theaters? And so I said to Connecticut, for instance, as the producer, I'm like, so we're doing one night in Connecticut next Thursday night at the Avon Theater where I used to go as a kid. I said, whoa. I called him. I said, well, are we going to be open for a week there? Are you going to keep us if we do well? And he said, well, that's difficult because Harvey Weinstein Company's got a movie here, and they may not let us, even if it's not doing well, they might not let us take it out of the theater. So I'm learning. I'm more of a student of how to produce a film right now than a producer. I love the title, but I'm really learning a lot about how do you maneuver those things, and what do you do if the Harvey Weinstein won't take the film out? How do you schmooze them and say, well, how about we put it in after this? So that's the kind of stuff I'm learning. I don't know how it works. I do know they've hired a wonderful guy named Kevin Eisen who has this company, and his job is to take movies like this, which are not easy sells, and put them in very specific little theaters around the country and slowly build, hopefully, a groundswell of the right people that want to see it. There's no spandex, there's no explosion, there's no sex, there's no car chases, there's no violence.
Has there been any discussion about film festivals?
We didn't get in. We tried.
Wow.
A bunch. We are a standard feel-good American film.
Yeah.
They don't want us.
They don't want that.
They don't want us. We are like, are you kidding me? I want the weird. I have seen films that are absolutely awful that have some gimmick to them.
Yeah.
At Sundance, absolute crap. And I'm like, how come we're not getting into Sundance? I've seen stuff there that I wouldn't put in the garbage pail.
Hamptons? Did you apply to Hamptons?
I don't know.
Because your name, you know, and then sometimes.
I think also the timing was off. We weren't right.
Okay.
We never quite finished enough. We only just recently finished it. We did get into Sarasota. One of the problems was we should have hired these guys, Frank, 2 years ago.
And they're in Hamptons.
Love
too.
them.
Nice.
And so when they got on board, all of a sudden everything exploded. Had they been on board, we would have been at festivals. We got into Sarasota, and that was the beginning. And they maneuvered it so that we were the closing night film of the festival.
Yeah.
That actually gave us enough noise that these 12 theaters would take us now turned into 40.
Wow.
So it's an interesting. People said, "Oh, this thing's actually got a little bit of legs. This thing, it's not bad. Maybe we should reconsider putting it in our theater." So everybody's now getting their feet wet with us, or like putting their toe in the water, and say, "Well, okay, we'll put it in for a week and see if anybody comes." So this is what That's why I'm out here in New York, instead of on my tractor, because I believe in it. I think it's a valuable film. And by the way, if we end up with 3 stars, 3.5 stars on Netflix, that's where I watch my movies. I mean, I'm in bed with my wife, and we go, "Okay,
Yeah.
want to watch a classic? Should we watch a classic comedy? Should we find something European that we haven't seen?" And you look at the stars, and you go, if it's got 2.5, you go, I don't think that's probably not. But if it's got somebody like Judi Dench, I don't care if it's got 1 star, I'm going to watch it. I've got but it's a great way for me to sort of find films. So I think somehow it will have an afterlife on VOD after this. I just think it's worth seeing. I think it's a very pleasurable experience to see, and it moves me. I watch it, and I find it. I don't know why, but I love the character. I think it's one of my favorite characters, like Prince of the City, Dinicello, Berger, and Hare, and Charlie Winship, some of my favorite guys, and of course Andy Brown and Everwood was a wonderful character.
I just was I reviewed Sidney Lumet, and there was at Tribeca, there was a whole thing of him.
I was there last Friday.
Were you there?
Oh yeah, I did the Q&A afterwards.
Because I ended up screening it, and then just writing the review.
Yeah.
But when you mentioned Sidney Lumet,
I thought it was wonderful the way they wove in Al and I and scenes that we, especially Al's work back then. But the way it was woven in to what Sidney was talking about, and it wasn't like, oh, what a great performance this is. It was actually complimenting Sidney's understanding of the world and Sidney's
New York, the New York stories.
Yeah.
That he was really beautifully captured.
Yeah.
But so this is. Do you see any possibility in the future of doing what you're doing with this film? If another project comes up, if someone approaches you with another good script and a possibility that, or do you say you want to step back and say I'll continue with TV and so forth?
Yes, I would do it. I would have hired some different people. It was too chaotic. And there were people that shouldn't have been there that were there who didn't understand that we were making something special. And they thought they were just making...
producer.
I mean, there were some people there I would and they'll share it. And they were let go, ultimately, because they were undermining the making of the film by trying to save money. And we could have saved money. And we had some people that were incompetent. So the incompetent people hired even more incompetent people, and that was very painful for me. It was a very, very difficult shoot, probably one of the most difficult shoots I've ever been on. So if I could have control from the beginning and go out to people and say, yes, there's no money in this, but we need you, and we're going to make a great film, most people say, I'm in. But they didn't do that. They just hired schlock people, and I'm still angry with them for not caring. That bothered me. So would I do it again? Yes. Would I want... I mean, Robert and I had a conversation this morning. He said to me, I'll never do that. I'm never going to direct a film. I'm not meant to be a director, Treat. You and I both realized that on the shoot. So I would find someone that or I would direct, But then I would find a DP who could really move the camera for me in a way that's, in the way that I know the camera tells the story. Of course I'd do it again. I'd rather, I hope that my show, Chesapeake Shores, runs for 5 years, and then I can do any independent film I want. But it's hard. It was not a great script when we started. We worked very hard on it. Nobody hands it to you on a platter. It's hard work.
We have to wrap it up. Maybe like
Okay.
3 more minutes.
Thank God, though, that you were there and you were able to.
And by the way,
feedback
Bob and the
shepherd.
actors have been very appreciative of that, of what of my work. I don't mean my work in the movie. I mean that every day I went to work wanting to make this the best film it could possibly be, and nobody had an ego on it. It wasn't ego. It was basically some people. It wasn't about ego. It was about the fact they just didn't care. They thought they're just making some schlocky independent film, and they wanted to play on the island. And there was a lack of focus from some people that I'm still angry about. But somehow it got made. We weren't all on the same page, but it got made.
And it has to be seen.
I hope so.
I really think it's very important that it's seen.
I hope so. I don't know how else to get it out there. But I think there's a bunch of people that would say this is good. It doesn't aspire to be to do great things. It's sort of a good movie that sort of just opens your eyes to various aspects of what's happened in politics, and maybe get you thinking about the fact that this problem with the big money, going into politics, is because it was never intended to be a career or a job. It was intended to be a couple of years of service to your country and then back to your farm. And it evolved, into a money-driven thing, and people, power corrupts.
Revolving doors. That was a very important point in the film. So it made a lot of important points, but it didn't hit the audience over the head, which that can drive people.
That's where I
in the
came in. I
opposite.
told Robert, in that speech I had at the end, I started explaining how Congress works, and I said, Robert, we're not here to teach. We're not going to preach in this movie. This has always got to be a guy talking about himself, and it's got to be particular to him. If I start explaining to the audience and those people how Congress works, and I said we're going to lose them, and he said okay. So we cut a whole page. It's long. I said, Robert, I gotta cut to the chase here. It's time to get off the stage or you can get the hook. And he was great. He let me end it when it should have ended.
So that's why I was calling you a storyteller. Would we see more of you writing, directing? Because you tell a wonderful story through this film, not just a conduit, but I feel...
If I could, listen, I'd like to find a story that I loved. I mean, actually, Joanna and I are talking about the possibility of making a film about the making of a film. In other words, the making of this, I think, is as interesting a movie as the movie itself, because it was so chaotic, and the fact that out of this dust grows this lovely little film. I think there's something in that. But
and it's an indie, and the indie filmmakers that I talk to, I mean, how they get the funding, how they do it's a hard scrabble, So
yeah,
it would be interesting and informative.
Interesting. I just got offered a film with Matthew Modine, and we were offered the 2 leads in the film, and part of you goes, oh God, I want to work with Matthew, and I want to do this. Yeah. And then Matthew wrote me an email and said, look, there's not enough money in this to shoot this in New York City. They did it. How do you do it online where the people can
Kickstarter?
Yeah, it's a Kickstarter movie. There's no money, which is fine. He said, but Treat, I just saw the guy's last film. It's just not good. And we're not. It's going to be too. It's too much. And Matthew, of course, has worked with all the great filmmakers, and smart guy, as becoming a filmmaker himself. And I went, you're right. It's just not right. And we both passed. But. So you want to find the one that you're willing to kill yourself on, like I did on this.